The morning air bit at Michael's face as he jogged through Pine Ridge Park. His breath formed small clouds that dissolved quickly in the winter chill. At 32 years old, Michael still kept to the strict fitness routine he had learned during his 6 years in the Army. Rain, shine, or even on days like today when the temperature dipped below freezing, he was out here putting in the work. He had been back home for almost 3 years now. Finding steady work hadn't been easy, but he'd finally landed a decent job at the local shipping warehouse. The early morning hours were the only time he could fit in his workouts before his shift started at 9. Michael slowed his pace as he reached his usual spot near the old gazebo. The park was mostly empty at this hour, just how he liked it. No distractions, no curious stares, just him and the rhythm of his breathing. He checked his watch. 6:45 a.m. Time for the strength portion of his routine. He dropped down onto the cold ground, feeling the frost through his gloves as he positioned himself for push-ups. The familiar burning in his shoulders came quickly as he counted under his breath. 28, 29, 30. He was about to switch to mountain climbers when the crunch of footsteps on the frozen grass caught his attention. Michael glanced up to see 2 police officers walking toward him. He stood up, wiping his gloved hands on his sweatpants. "Morning." "Officers," he said with a nod, his voice friendly but cautious. The taller officer, whose nameplate read Reynolds, kept his hand resting near his belt as he approached. The second officer, shorter and stockier with Briggs on his uniform, hung back slightly. "Got a call about suspicious activity in the park," Officer Reynolds said, his eyes scanning Michael from head to toe. "What are you doing out here so early?" Michael gestured to his workout clothes and the small exercise mat rolled up beside his backpack. "Just my morning workout, sir. I do it every day before work." Officer Briggs stepped forward. "You live around here?" The question came with an edge that made Michael's stomach tighten. "About 15 minutes that way." Michael pointed east. "The Oakwood Apartments." The officers exchanged a look that Michael had seen too many times before. Oakwood was in the mostly black and immigrant part of town, while this park sat on the edge of Hillcrest, one of the wealthier, predominantly white neighborhoods. "Let me see some ID," Reynolds said, not a request but a command. Michael slowly reached for his wallet in his jacket pocket, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. "I'm just exercising, officers. I've been coming to this park for months." "ID," Reynolds repeated, ignoring Michael's explanation. As Michael handed over his driver's license, he noticed a young woman sitting on a bench about 30 yards away. Her attention fixed on the interaction. She had a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other. Officer Briggs took the license and walked back to the patrol car, presumably to run a check. Reynolds stayed, watching Michael with an expression that made the cold morning feel even colder. "So what were you really looking at around here?" Reynolds asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't buying the workout story. "Nothing, sir. Just exercising," Michael said, keeping his voice even despite the frustration building inside him. "You know what? Why don't you show me these exercises you're doing?" Reynolds gestured to the ground with a smirk. "Go on, drop and give me 20. Michael blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. If you're out here to exercise, then exercise. On the ground." The humiliation burned hotter than any workout ever could, but Michael knew better than to argue. He'd seen what happened to people who resisted, even verbally. With his jaw clenched tight, he got down on the cold ground again. "Count 'em out loud," Reynolds added, the smirk still playing on his lips. 1, 2, 3, Michael began, each push-up feeling like a surrender of his dignity. The cold seeped through his gloves and workout clothes. From the corner of his eye, he could see the woman on the bench had stood up. She was definitely recording with her phone now, though she tried to be discreet about it. "Look at this, Reynolds," Officer Briggs called as he walked back from the patrol car. "Says here he's got a prior. Disorderly conduct and resisting arrest." Michael continued his push-ups, the anger and shame making his arms shake. That prior had been at a peaceful protest 3 years ago, when officers had kettled demonstrators and made mass arrests. The charges had eventually been dropped, but the record remained. "Not surprised," Reynolds said loudly enough for Michael to hear. "These guys from Oakwood always have something on their record." He turned his attention back to Michael. "Keep going. I didn't say stop. 18, 19, 20, Michael finished, standing up with as much dignity as he could muster. "Now jumping jacks," Reynolds ordered, his eyes gleaming with enjoyment. "Let's see 30 of those." The woman with the phone had moved closer, pretending to be checking something in her bag while her phone continued recording. Michael caught her eye for just a moment, seeing the outrage and sympathy in her expression. "I don't think this is necessary, officer," Michael said quietly. "What was that?" Reynolds stepped closer, his hand moving to rest on his taser. "You refusing to comply?" The threat wasn't subtle. Michael started doing jumping jacks, the cold air burning his lungs as he increased his pace. "You know," Briggs said, watching Michael with a look of disgust. "People in Hillcrest don't feel safe with folks like you hanging around their homes. Next time, exercise in your own neighborhood." "Yeah," Reynolds added. "This nice neighborhood isn't really your style, know what I mean?" Michael continued the jumping jacks, focusing on counting to keep himself from saying something that would make this situation worse. 28, 29, 30. He stopped, breathing hard, his body warm from exertion but his spirit chilled to the core. Reynolds handed the license back. "We'll be keeping an eye on you. Don't let us catch you casing houses or we'll have a different kind of conversation. I told you I'm just exercising," Michael said, his voice steady despite everything. "I have every right to be in this public park." "Rights, huh?" Reynolds laughed. "Just stay out of trouble." He nodded to Briggs and they turned to leave, but not before Reynolds added, "People around here work hard for what they have. They don't need your kind bringing down property values." Michael stood still, watching them walk away, feeling the weight of the injustice pressing down on him like a physical thing. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was just trying to live his life, follow his routine, be healthy. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal for existing in the wrong place. After the officers had gone, the woman with the phone approached him cautiously. "Hey," she said, her voice soft with concern. "I'm Tanya. I got all of that on video. What they did, that wasn't right." Michael looked at her, surprised by the gesture but unsure whether it would make any difference. "Thanks, but what good will it do? It'll be my word against theirs." "Not anymore," Tanya said, holding up her phone. "I caught everything, including what they said about your kind and this neighborhood. The way they made you exercise in the cold while they ran your ID. That's harassment and profiling, plain and simple." Michael sighed, picking up his exercise mat and backpack. "Look, I appreciate it, but I've got to get to work. I can't afford to miss a shift dealing with this." "I understand," Tanya said, but she didn't back down. "But this isn't okay. My roommate works for a community legal aid office. At least let me send you the video in case you change your mind." Something in her determined expression made Michael pause. Maybe it was worth standing up this time. Maybe with actual evidence someone would listen. "Okay," he said finally, pulling out his phone. They exchanged numbers and Tanya promised to send him the video right away. As Michael walked out of the park toward the bus stop, the morning's events replayed in his mind. The humiliation of being forced to exercise like some kind of performing animal, the casual racism in the officers' comments, the threat behind their words. It wasn't the first time he'd experienced something like this, but it was the first time someone else had witnessed it and offered proof. By the time he reached the bus stop, his phone buzzed with a message from Tanya. The video was there, along with a note. "This wasn't right. If you want to do something about it, I'll help. No pressure, but these guys shouldn't be allowed to treat anyone this way." Michael stared at his phone for a long moment. He had always tried to keep his head down to avoid trouble. Fighting back seemed risky, especially against police officers. But as he watched the first few seconds of the video, saw himself through Tanya's lens, a man being degraded for no reason other than being in the wrong place, something shifted inside him. The bus arrived, its doors hissing open. Michael boarded, finding a seat in the back. As the bus pulled away from the curb, he replayed the video with the sound low, listening to the officers' words and seeing their smug expressions. By the time he reached his stop at the warehouse, he had watched it 3 times. During his lunch break, he found himself texting Tanya. "I've been thinking about what happened. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time someone did something about it." Her response came almost immediately. "I'm with you. Whatever you decide." For the rest of his shift, as he moved boxes and checked inventory, Michael couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the park. About all the times he and others had swallowed their dignity and stayed silent. About what might happen if just this once he didn't. By the end of the day, his decision was made. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, those officers would learn that their actions had consequences. Tomorrow he would get his due. Tanya Wilson had never planned to get involved in someone else's business that morning. As a second-year law student drowning in coursework, she just wanted a quiet moment with her coffee before heading to the library. The park bench had been her regular thinking spot since moving to the area last semester, a place to clear her head before diving into another day of legal precedents and case studies. She'd noticed the man exercising near the gazebo when she first arrived. Nothing unusual about that. People use the park for workouts all the time. But when the police cruiser pulled up and two officers approached him, something in their body language made her pause mid-sip. Tanya watched as the interaction quickly shifted from questioning to something that made her stomach knot. When they forced the man to do push-ups in the freezing cold, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Without thinking twice, she'd pulled out her phone and started recording. Now, sitting in her small apartment that evening, she watched the video again. The sound quality was better than she'd expected. The officers' voices carried clearly across the quiet morning air. These guys from Oakwood always have something on their record. People in Hillcrest don't feel safe with folks like you hanging around their homes. This nice neighborhood isn't really your style, know what I mean? Every time she replayed it, Tanya felt the same surge of anger. In her constitutional law class just last week, they discussed police powers and limitations. What she'd witnessed was textbook harassment and profiling. Her roommate, Diego, leaned over the back of the couch to watch the video. He worked part-time at the Community Legal Aid Center while finishing his social work degree. "This is exactly the kind of case Lisa talks about," Diego said, referring to his supervisor. "Clear evidence of discrimination. Has he called you back yet?" Tanya shook her head. "Not since that text during his lunch break. I'm worried he's having second thoughts." "Can't blame him," Diego sighed. "The system doesn't exactly encourage people to speak up." As if on cue, Tanya's phone buzzed with a message. It was Michael. "Can we talk?" "Not over text." Tanya glanced at the clock, nearly 8 p.m. "He wants to meet tonight." "You should go," Diego said. "But be careful, public place, right?" "Of course." She typed a quick reply suggesting a coffee shop near campus that stayed open late. Michael agreed, saying he'd be there in 30 minutes. The coffee shop was half empty when Tanya arrived. She chose a corner table away from other customers, ordered a tea, and waited. She recognized Michael the moment he walked in. Taller than he'd seemed in the park, his shoulders tense as he scanned the room. When he spotted her, his expression remained guarded. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, settling into the chair across from her. He hadn't ordered anything. "I've been thinking about this all day." "Me too," Tanya said. "I'm still shocked by how they treated you." Michael's eyes met hers, searching for something, sincerity, perhaps, or ulterior motives. "Why did you help me?" "You don't even know me." The question caught Tanya off guard. "Because what happened was wrong," she said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." Michael gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, they wouldn't. Most people would have minded their business or looked the other way. Trust me, I know." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Tanya sipped her tea, giving him space to continue when he was ready. "I've been stopped before," Michael finally said, his voice low. "Asked for ID, questioned about why I'm somewhere. But never like that, never made to perform like that, like I wasn't even a person." Tanya nodded, feeling inadequate in the face of his experience. "I can't imagine how that felt." "The thing is," Michael continued, "I almost let it go. Again. That's what we're taught, you know? Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Live to fight another day." "What changed your mind?" Tanya asked. Michael pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between them. "I showed the video to my older brother. He got real quiet, then asked me something that hit hard. He said, 'If not you, with actual evidence, then who?' He turned the phone so Tanya could see the screen. It showed a social media post. Michael had uploaded a short clip of the incident, just enough to show what had happened without revealing the officers' faces or badge numbers. The comment section was already filling up. "I posted it about an hour ago," he explained. "Left out identifying details for now. But people are responding. Turns out I'm not the only one these officers have harassed." Tanya leaned forward, scrolling through the comments. Several described similar experiences with officers matching the same description in the same neighborhood. "This is bigger than just what happened to me," Michael said, a new resolve in his voice. "That's why I wanted to talk in person. I need to know, are you really willing to help? Because once this really gets going, there's no turning back. My roommate works at the Community Legal Aid Center, Tanya replied. They specialize in cases like this. They can provide guidance, resources, maybe even representation if you decide to file a formal complaint. I don't know if I want to go that far yet, Michael admitted. But I want these officers to know they can't just treat people this way. I want the department to know they're being watched. Tanya nodded. That's fair. What's your next step? I'm meeting with some community organizers tomorrow morning. People who've been documenting police interactions in the area for years. They've invited the local news too. Tanya's eyebrows rose. That's moving fast. I know. That's why I needed to be sure you're on board. The unedited video is important evidence. They'll ask where it came from, who recorded it. I'm in, Tanya said without hesitation. I can speak to what I saw. I can provide the original file with the metadata intact. Relief washed over Michael's face. Thank you, really. No need to thank me. This is about doing what's right. Michael's phone buzzed with another notification. More comments, more shares. The post was spreading faster than either of them had anticipated. Look at this, he said, turning the phone back toward himself. His eyes widened. Someone tagged the police department's official account. And the mayor's office. Tanya felt a flutter of anxiety. That'll get their attention. Yeah, Michael agreed, a mixture of worry and determination crossing his face. Too late to back out now. As they continued talking, mapping out what the next day might bring, Tanya noticed Michael gradually relaxing. His shoulders lowered. His gestures became more animated as he described his community and the previous efforts to address policing issues. By the time they'd been talking for an hour, it felt less like a strategy session and more like two people finding common ground in a cause they both believed in. I should get going, Michael eventually said, checking the time. Early shift tomorrow, then the meeting at noon. I'll be there, Tanya promised. Text me the address. As they walked out of the coffee shop, the night air was even colder than the morning had been. Michael paused on the sidewalk. You know, when this happened this morning, I felt so powerless, like nothing I could do would matter. He glanced at his phone, still lighting up with notifications. I've never seen people respond like this before. Like they actually care. People do care, Tanya said. Sometimes they just need to see something to believe it. Michael nodded. My brother was right. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? Get some rest, Tanya advised. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. They parted ways at the corner, heading in opposite directions. Tanya walked back to her apartment with her mind racing, already formulating the questions the community organizers might ask, the points the media might focus on. When she arrived home, Diego was still up, laptop open on the coffee table. How'd it go? He asked. Tanya dropped her bag and coat on a chair. It's moving fast. He posted part of the video online. People are sharing their own stories about these same officers. Diego whistled low. That's going to shake things up. There's a meeting tomorrow. Community organizers, maybe press. She sank onto the couch next to him. I said I'd be there. You should talk to Lisa first, Diego suggested. She can give you some guidance on what to expect, what to avoid saying. Tanya nodded, pulling out her phone to send a message to Diego's supervisor. As she typed, a news notification popped up on her screen. She froze, then turned the phone so Diego could see. The local news station had already picked up the story. The headline read, Viral video shows officers forcing man to exercise in freezing conditions. That was fast, Diego murmured. Too fast? Tanya wondered aloud. What if this spins out of control? Diego closed his laptop. It might. But sometimes that's what it takes to get attention, to make change happen. Tanya stared at the notification, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety coursing through her. What had started as a simple act, recording an injustice she witnessed by chance, was quickly becoming something much bigger. I just hope Michael's ready for what's coming, she said quietly, because after tomorrow, nothing's going to be the same. She couldn't know just how right she was. By the following morning, the video would reach over 50,000 views. By noon, when they gathered for the meeting, that number would triple. And by the end of the next day, both Michael and Tanya would find themselves at the center of a storm that had been brewing in their city for years. A storm that would finally bring to light not just one incident in a park, but a pattern of behavior that could no longer be ignored or explained away. The recording had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. For better or worse, they were now part of a story much bigger than themselves. Michael barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those officers standing over him, felt the cold ground beneath his hands, heard their mocking voices. He kept checking his phone, watching as the video spread further than he could have imagined. By 5 a.m., when he gave up on sleep entirely, local news outlets had picked up the story, and his inbox was filled with messages from strangers. Some offered support. Some shared similar stories. Others warned him to back down, that he was making trouble for himself. Michael read them all, a storm of emotions churning inside him. Validation, fear, determination, doubt. His brother called just as he was getting ready for work. "You seeing this?" Anthony asked without preamble. "It's everywhere, little brother." "Yeah," Michael answered, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Honestly, it's kind of overwhelming. You still going to that meeting today?" Michael took a deep breath. "I said I would. Want me to come with you? I can switch shifts." The offer meant more than Anthony probably realized. At 37, his older brother had always been the cautious one, the one who advised keeping your head down and staying out of trouble. For him to offer his support now spoke volumes. "Thanks, but I'll be okay. That law student will be there, and the community group seems solid." "All right, just be careful, Michael. These things can get complicated fast." After they hung up, Michael checked his work schedule. His shift ended at 11. Just enough time to go home, change, and make it to the community center for the noon meeting. He texted Tanya to confirm she was still coming, then headed out the door, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. Work was a blur. His co-workers had seen the video, and word had spread through the warehouse. Some clapped him on the shoulder as he passed, offering quiet words of encouragement. Others kept their distance, as if his situation might be contagious. His supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Carol, called him into her office mid-morning. "I've seen the video," she said without preamble. "If you need time off to deal with this, just let me know." Michael wasn't sure if that was support or a warning, but he thanked her anyway. By the time he clocked out, 3 local news vans were parked outside the community center. Michael's step faltered at the sight of them. This was bigger than he'd expected. He ducked his head and walked faster, taking a side entrance into the building. Inside, the main meeting room was already crowded. About 30 people had gathered. Some he recognized from the neighborhood, others complete strangers. At the front of the room stood an older man with salt and pepper hair, and the bearing of someone used to commanding attention. This was David Wilson, the head of the local Community Justice Coalition. Michael had spoken with him briefly on the phone the night before. David spotted Michael and gestured him forward. "There he is," he said, his voice carrying across the room. Conversations quieted as heads turned in Michael's direction. Before Michael could respond, a side door opened and Tanya slipped in, accompanied by an older woman in a neat blazer. They made their way toward Michael, and Tanya gave him a small, encouraging smile. "This is Lisa Chen," she introduced the woman beside her. "She's the director of the Legal Aid Center." Lisa extended her hand. "Thank you for coming forward, Michael. Before things get started, I wanted to make sure you understand what might happen today. Once we open those doors to the press, this becomes much bigger than just social media chatter." Michael shook her hand, appreciating her directness. "I understand. Have you been contacted by the police department?" "Internal affairs, perhaps?" "No," Michael replied. "Nothing official." Lisa nodded. "They'll reach out soon. When they do, I'd like you to direct them to me." She handed him a business card. "No statements without legal counsel present. I can't afford—" "Pro bono," she interrupted with a small smile. "Let's just say I've been waiting for a case like this for a long time." Before Michael could thank her, David called the meeting to order. He introduced Michael and briefly explained what the video showed, though most people in the room had already seen it. Then he introduced Tanya as the person who had recorded the incident. "We have an opportunity here," David told the group. "An opportunity to shine a light on practices that have been going on in our community for far too long." He looked at Michael. "Would you like to say a few words?" Michael hadn't prepared anything. He looked around the room at all the expectant faces and felt his mouth go dry. Then his eyes landed on Tanya, who gave him a small nod. "I'm not a public speaker," Michael began hesitantly. "I'm just a guy who was trying to exercise in a public park." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What happened to me yesterday, it wasn't new. It wasn't unusual. It happens every day to people who look like me, In neighborhoods where people think we don't belong. The room was completely silent now. The difference is, this time someone was watching. This time there's proof. He glanced at Tanya. And this time I decided I wasn't going to just walk away and pretend it didn't happen. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Someone started to clap and others joined in. Michael felt a rush of emotion that surprised him. Not anger or fear, but something like pride. David took over again, outlining the coalition's plan. First, they would file a formal complaint with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. Second, they would request body camera footage from the officers, which should have captured the entire incident. Third, they would call for an independent investigation into patterns of behavior by these specific officers. And now, David said, if Michael and Tanya are ready, we'll invite in the press. The next hour passed in a blur of camera flashes and rapid-fire questions. Michael stuck to the facts, describing exactly what had happened in the park without embellishment. Tanya did the same, explaining why she had decided to record the interaction. Lisa stood nearby, occasionally stepping in when questions veered into legal territory. One reporter, a sharp-eyed woman from the local news station, directed her question to David. The police department released a statement an hour ago saying they're looking into the incident, but that the video doesn't show the full context. Your response? David smiled thinly. The context is that a man was exercising in a public park. Nothing more. If the department wants to explain what context justifies making someone do push-ups in freezing weather while running their ID, I'd be very interested to hear it. Another reporter raised his hand. Has there been any response from city officials? Not yet, David answered. But we expect that to change very soon. As if on cue, Lisa's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then whispered something to David, whose eyebrows rose slightly before he regained his composure. It seems the mayor's office has just issued a statement, expressing deep concern over the video and promising a thorough and transparent investigation, David announced to the room. Perhaps they're watching our press conference. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd, but Michael barely heard it. The reality of what was happening was finally sinking in. This wasn't just social media outrage anymore. This was the mayor's office. This was real. After the press left, people began to drift away. Some approached Michael to share their own stories or offer support. A few gave him their phone numbers, telling him to call if he needed anything. By the time the room had mostly cleared, Michael felt drained but strangely calm. Tanya approached him as he sat alone, staring at his phone. How are you holding up? She asked, taking the seat beside him. It's a lot, he admitted. I keep thinking I must be dreaming. You did great, she assured him. Really steady. Really clear, thanks. And thank you for being here. Lisa joined them, her expression serious. The police chief just called a press conference for 5 p.m. today. Unusual timing, they typically wait longer to respond. Is that good or bad? Michael asked. It means they're feeling the pressure, Lisa replied. Public opinion is firmly on your side right now, and they know it. So what happens next? We watch the press conference. We see what they say, and then we respond accordingly. Lisa placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. But no matter what, remember this. You've already won the most important battle. You've shown people what's really happening. You've made it impossible to ignore. As they left the community center, Michael was surprised to find the sun shining. Somehow he'd expected the weather to match his mood, turbulent, uncertain. But the day was bright and clear, the earlier chill giving way to unexpected warmth. His phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. Just saw you on the news. Proud of you, little brother. For the first time since those officers approached him in the park, Michael felt something like hope. He wasn't naive enough to think one video could change everything. He knew the road ahead would likely be difficult, with potential backlash and pushback from those who benefited from the status quo. But something had shifted. He'd spoken his truth and people had listened. He'd stood up and others had stood with him. As he walked home to prepare for the police chief's press conference, Michael felt the weight of yesterday's humiliation beginning to lift. In its place was a growing sense of purpose, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something important. The response had begun, and tomorrow it would continue. The police chief's press conference was scheduled for 5 p.m. at City Hall. By 4:30, The steps outside were packed with reporters, cameras, and a growing crowd of citizens holding hastily made signs demanding accountability. Michael stood toward the back with Tanya and Lisa, trying to stay inconspicuous. Despite Lisa's advice to watch from a distance, he felt he needed to be there in person. "Remember," Lisa whispered, "whatever they say, don't react visibly. The cameras will be looking for your response." Michael nodded, pulling his jacket collar higher. He'd already been recognized 3 times on his way here, stopped by strangers wanting to shake his hand or tell him their own stories. His face was becoming too familiar for comfort. At exactly 5 p.m., the glass doors at the top of the steps swung open. Police Chief Robert Morgan stepped out, flanked by the mayor and several serious-faced men and women in suits. The crowd's murmuring quieted as the chief approached the podium, bristling with microphones. Chief Morgan was a career officer with 30 years on the force. His weathered face betrayed little emotion as he adjusted the microphones and cleared his throat. "Good evening. I'm here to address the video that has been circulating showing an interaction between 2 of our officers and a citizen in Pine Ridge Park yesterday morning." The chief paused, looking directly into the cameras. "I have reviewed the video multiple times. I have spoken with the officers involved. I have also reviewed their body camera footage, which captured the entire interaction." Michael felt his heart rate quicken. He hadn't expected them to acknowledge the body cameras so quickly. "Based on this review," the chief continued, "I have made the decision to place both officers on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Lisa gripped Michael's arm, a small gesture of triumph. "The behavior displayed in the video does not reflect the standards we expect from members of our police force. While I cannot comment on specific disciplinary measures during an ongoing investigation, I want to be clear. We do not condone the treatment this citizen received." The chief's words were measured, careful, but Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. He'd expected denials, excuses, talk of a few seconds taken out of context. Not this. "Mayor Thompson has requested an independent review by the Citizen Police Oversight Committee, which I fully support. We will cooperate fully with this review and with any recommendations that result from it." The mayor stepped forward then, a tall woman with a politician's practiced sincerity. "I want to speak directly to the young man in this video," she said, and Michael felt countless eyes shifting in his direction. "On behalf of the city, I apologize for your experience. What happened to you was unacceptable, and we are committed to ensuring it doesn't happen to others." The press conference continued with details about the investigation process, the timeline for the independent review, and promises of transparency. But Michael was still stuck on that word. Apologize. A public apology from the mayor, less than 36 hours after the incident. When the floor opened for questions, reporters shouted over each other. The chief pointed to a tall man in the front row. "Can you confirm reports that these same officers have been the subject of previous complaints?" The chief's expression tightened. "I cannot comment on personnel records during an active investigation." Another reporter jumped in. "Sources in the department claim Officer Reynolds has had 7 complaints filed against him in the past 3 years. Can you confirm this?" "As I said, I cannot." "Is it true," interrupted a woman from a local news station, "that 3 of those complaints specifically involved allegations of racial profiling?" The chief looked increasingly uncomfortable. "We take all complaints seriously and investigate them thoroughly. That's all I can say at this time." The questions continued, growing more pointed, more specific. It was clear the reporters had been doing their homework, digging into the backgrounds of the officers involved. With each question, the narrative shifted, from a single incident in a park to what appeared to be a pattern of behavior that had been overlooked or dismissed for years. Lisa leaned close to Michael's ear. "This is going better than I could have hoped. They're on their heels." When the press conference ended, reporters immediately began searching the crowd for Michael. Lisa took his arm. "Time to go. We'll watch the rest on TV." They slipped away through a side entrance, narrowly avoiding the press. Tanya had arranged for her roommate Diego to pick them up, and they ducked into his waiting car just as reporters began to spill out onto the street. "That was intense," Diego said as he pulled away from the curb. "You're trending nationally now, Michael. Not just locally." Michael checked his phone and saw dozens of missed calls, hundreds of notifications. "This is insane," he muttered. "It's just beginning," Lisa said. The chief wouldn't have acted this quickly without significant pressure from above. My guess is the mayor saw the political winds shifting and decided to get ahead of it. They drove to a small diner on the outskirts of town where they were less likely to be recognized. As they slid into a corner booth, the TV above the counter was replaying clips from the press conference. "So what happens next?" Michael asked, stirring his coffee absently. "The administrative leave is just the first step," Lisa explained. "The internal investigation will take weeks, maybe months. The independent review might take even longer. But this feels different," Tanya added. "The way they're responding, the public pressure, it's not the usual playbook of deny, delay, distract." Lisa nodded. "The video changed the equation. It's one thing to have allegations. It's another to have clear evidence that anyone can see with their own eyes." Their conversation paused as the diner's door opened and a group of uniformed officers walked in. Michael tensed, but Lisa placed a calming hand on his arm. "They're not here for you," she whispered. "Just act natural." The officers took seats at the counter, apparently at the end of their shift. One glanced toward their booth, did a double take, and whispered something to his colleagues. A few turned to look, their expressions unreadable. Michael held his breath, unsure what to expect. Then one of the officers, a woman with short gray hair, stood up and walked over to their table. Michael braced himself. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you the man from the park?" "From the video?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. The officer looked uncomfortable but determined. "I just wanted to say, what happened to you wasn't right. Not all of us are like that." She glanced back at her colleagues who were watching intently. "Some of us have been trying to report behavior like that for years. Maybe now someone will finally listen." Before Michael could respond, she walked back to her group. The interaction lasted less than 30 seconds. But it left him stunned. "That," Lisa said with satisfaction, "is how you know things are changing." The next morning, Michael woke to news that the city council had called an emergency session to discuss policing policies. Community organizers had planned a rally at the park where the incident occurred. And most surprisingly, several current and former police officers had come forward to discuss what they called a toxic culture within certain units of the department. Michael's phone rang as he was watching the coverage. It was David from the Community Justice Coalition. "Have you seen the latest?" David asked without preamble. "I'm watching it now. The council wants you to speak at their session tomorrow. They're discussing a complete overhaul of the department's training and accountability systems." Michael sat on the edge of his bed, overwhelmed. "Me, what would I even say?" "The truth. Your experience. What you hope will change." David paused. "This is an opportunity, Michael. The kind that doesn't come along often." After hanging up, Michael stood at his window looking out at the city he'd called home his entire life. He thought about all the times he'd felt unwelcome in certain neighborhoods, all the sideways glances and security guards following him in stores. He thought about his friends and family who had similar stories, most without video evidence, most without public outcry. His brother's words echoed in his mind. "If not you, with actual evidence, then who?" By the time the council session convened the following day, Michael had prepared his remarks with help from Lisa and Tanya. The chamber was packed, with overflow crowds watching on screens set up in the hallways. When Michael's name was called, a hush fell over the room. He approached the podium, acutely aware of the weight of expectation on his shoulders. The council members watched him intently. Cameras tracked his every move. In the front row sat his brother Anthony, who had taken the day off work to be there. Behind him, he could feel the supportive presence of Lisa, Tanya, David, and dozens of community members who had rallied to his side. Michael unfolded his prepared statement, then looked up at the council. These were people with the power to make real changes, changes that could prevent others from experiencing what he had. 2 days ago, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I was just a guy doing push-ups in a park." As he spoke, describing not just what had happened but what it meant, the humiliation, the fear, the resignation that came from knowing this was just how things were, he could see the impact of his words on the council members' faces. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry. A few appeared genuinely moved. He concluded not with accusations but with a call to action. This isn't about punishing 2 officers. This is about changing a system that allowed them to think their behavior was acceptable. This is about making sure the next person exercising in that park, regardless of what they look like or where they live, is treated with basic human dignity. When he finished, the chamber erupted in applause. The council president thanked him for his courage and assured him that concrete changes would result from this incident. By the end of the session, the council had unanimously approved a series of immediate actions: funding for additional bias training, the creation of an independent review board with actual enforcement powers, and a comprehensive audit of complaint patterns against officers throughout the department. As Michael left City Hall that afternoon, surrounded by supporters and journalists, he felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in what had been accomplished, hope for meaningful change, but also a weariness from being thrust into a spotlight he'd never sought. "You did it," Tanya said, squeezing his arm. "You actually did it." Michael shook his head. "No, we did it. All of us." And he knew it was true. What had started as a humiliating moment in a cold park had transformed, through the actions of many people, into the beginning of something important. The reckoning had come not just for 2 officers, but for a system long overdue for change. 3 months passed. The seasons changed, winter giving way to the first hints of spring. Trees in Pine Ridge Park sprouted tender green buds, and early morning exercisers no longer had to brave freezing temperatures. Michael was one of them. He still came to the same spot near the gazebo, still did his push-ups and mountain climbers, still prepared for his warehouse shift that started at 9. But everything else had changed. People recognized him now. Some nodded respectfully as they passed. Others stopped to talk, to thank him, to share their own stories. Occasionally, someone would take a not-so-subtle photo, and Michael would find himself tagged on social media again. Fame, even local fame, was something he was still getting used to. This morning he finished his workout and checked his watch. He had an hour before work, plenty of time to make it to the community center for the monthly oversight committee meeting. As he gathered his things, he spotted a familiar figure approaching on one of the park paths. "Right on schedule," Tanya called, 2 coffee cups in hand. "Do you ever take a day off?" "Look who's talking," Michael replied with a smile, accepting the coffee. "Don't you have finals to study for?" "I'm taking a brain break. Besides, I wouldn't miss today's meeting." They walked together through the park that had become unexpectedly a symbol of change in their city. Neither mentioned the gazebo or what had happened there. They didn't need to. The Community Justice Coalition had converted a former classroom in the community center into headquarters for the newly established Citizen Police Oversight Committee. When Michael and Tanya arrived, the room was already buzzing with activity. David sat at the head of the conference table reviewing documents with Lisa and 2 other attorneys from the Legal Aid Center. "Morning," David greeted them without looking up. "Just going over the final report before we present it." The report was the culmination of their 3-month investigation, a comprehensive review of departmental practices, complaint patterns, and recommended reforms. Today they would present it to city officials, including the police chief and mayor. "Nervous?" Tanya asked Michael as they took seats along the wall. "A little," he admitted. "You?" "Terrified," she said with a small laugh. "I never planned on being an activist, you know. I just wanted to be a lawyer." "You still will be," Michael assured her. "A better one because of this." Their conversation paused as more people filtered into the room. Community members, retired officers who had volunteered their expertise, data analysts who had compiled statistics for the report. The coalition had grown substantially since that first press conference. At precisely 10 a.m., the official delegation arrived. Chief Morgan entered first, followed by the mayor and 3 city council members. The atmosphere in the room shifted, tension mingling with purpose. David stood and welcomed them. "We appreciate you taking the time to hear our findings firsthand," he began. "As you know, this committee was formed in response to a specific incident, but our work quickly expanded to address systemic issues within the department. For the next hour, various committee members presented sections of the report. They detailed patterns of discriminatory enforcement, inconsistencies in discipline for officer misconduct, and gaps in training and supervision. They also highlighted promising practices within the department that could be expanded and strengthened. Michael listened intently. He'd contributed to the report, sharing his experience and reviewing drafts, but hearing it presented in its entirety underscored just how much had been accomplished in 3 months. When the formal presentation ended, the mayor spoke first. "This is Thorough, she acknowledged, flipping through the printed copy. More thorough than I expected, honestly. We had a lot of help, David replied, nodding toward the former officers in the room. People who wanted to see things change. The chief cleared his throat. Some of these recommendations are already being implemented. The additional training, the revised complaint process, others will take more time and resources. And political will, Lisa added pointedly. The mayor didn't take the bait. I think today has demonstrated there's no shortage of will. What happens next depends on whether we can work together effectively. The meeting concluded with agreements for regular follow-up, timelines for implementing key recommendations, and a framework for continued community involvement in the process. It wasn't perfect, but it was far more than anyone would have thought possible 3 months earlier. As the officials were leaving, Chief Morgan paused beside Michael. I'd like a word, if you have a moment, he said quietly. Michael exchanged glances with Tanya before following the chief to a quiet corner of the room. I want you to know, Morgan began, his voice low but clear, that Officers Reynolds and Briggs are no longer with the department. Michael stayed silent, waiting. The internal investigation concluded last week. There was more than enough evidence to justify termination. The chief met Michael's eyes directly. It wasn't just your incident. Once we started looking, we found a pattern going back years. Why tell me this personally? Michael asked. Because you deserve to know, and because I owe you an apology as well. The chief's professional demeanor slipped just slightly. These officers were under my command. Their behavior reflects on my leadership. Michael hadn't expected this conversation, hadn't prepared for it. He thought about all the anger he'd felt that morning in the park, all the humiliation and helplessness. I appreciate that, he finally said, but firing 2 officers doesn't fix the system that protected them for so long. I know. The chief nodded. That's the harder part. That's why we need people like you holding us accountable. After the chief left, Michael rejoined the others, who were celebrating the successful presentation. What did Morgan want? Tanya asked. Michael told them about the officer's termination. The news was met with nods of approval but no excessive celebration. Everyone in the room knew this was just one small piece of a much larger puzzle. David raised a coffee cup in a mock toast. To progress. Small steps, but in the right direction. Later that day, as Michael walked to his warehouse shift, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The mayor had just announced the city's commitment to fully fund all the major recommendations in the coalition's report. The accompanying photo showed her at a podium in front of City Hall, with the police chief and several council members standing behind her in a show of unified support. Michael paused on the sidewalk, staring at his phone screen. Politics aside, this was significant. Real funding meant real change was possible. His brother called that evening as Michael was heating up dinner. Saw the news, Anthony said. They're actually doing it. Making real changes. Looks that way, Michael agreed, still cautious in his optimism. You know what this means, right? You started something important. I didn't start it, Michael corrected. I was just the one who got caught on video this time. People have been fighting for these changes for years. True, Anthony acknowledged. But sometimes it takes a spark to light the fire. That was you, little brother. 6 months after the incident in the park, Michael stood in the community center gym, watching as the first class of officers completed a new community engagement training program, designed with input from the coalition. The program paired officers with residents from historically over-policed neighborhoods for dialogue sessions and collaborative problem-solving exercises. Tanya stood beside him, now officially a certified legal observer, after completing a training program through her law school. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here? She asked, gesturing at the room full of officers and community members engaged in animated conversation. Michael shook his head. Never. I just wanted to do my push-ups in peace. They shared a quiet laugh at how far things had come from that cold morning. Later that week, Michael attended a ceremony where the mayor signed a new ordinance establishing permanent community oversight of the police department, with real authority to review complaints and recommend discipline. As one of the inaugural board members, Michael would help shape how the new system worked in practice. It wasn't a perfect solution. There had been resistance, compromises, setbacks along the way. Some officers had resigned rather than adapt to the new requirements. Some community members felt the changes didn't go far enough. The work would continue for years to come, But standing there, watching the mayor hand ceremonial pens to the coalition members who had made this possible, Michael felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of purpose. What had begun as a humiliating experience had transformed into a calling, a way to ensure others wouldn't face the same treatment. On his way home, Michael took a detour through Pine Ridge Park. The summer evening was warm, families picnicking on the grass, children playing on the swings. He passed the gazebo where it had all started and continued to his usual workout spot. 2 patrol officers were walking nearby. When they spotted Michael, they nodded in recognition. There was no hostility, no suspicion, just the simple acknowledgement of another person enjoying the park. It was a small thing, but in that moment it felt like exactly the change he'd been fighting for. Michael dropped down and did a set of push-ups, not because anyone was making him, not as an act of defiance, but simply because he wanted to, because it was his park too, because he belonged there as much as anyone else. When he finished, he sat on the grass for a while, watching the sky turn gold and pink with sunset. His phone buzzed with a message from David about the next coalition meeting. Another step in the ongoing work of transforming a moment of injustice into lasting change. Michael typed a quick reply. "I'll be there." And he would be. Because if he had learned anything over these past months, it was this: change didn't happen on its own. It happened because ordinary people just like him, just like Tanya, just like everyone who had stood with them, refused to look away when they witnessed injustice. It happened because they chose to act, even when it would have been easier to walk away. It happened because they persisted, long after the cameras left and the public attention faded. It happened because they believed it was possible. And now, sitting in the park where it all began, Michael could see that change happening all around him. Not complete, not perfect, but real and growing and impossible to ignore. He had gotten his due, after all. Not in vengeance or retribution, but in something far more valuable. The knowledge that his humiliation had not been in vain, that his stand had mattered, that the world could indeed be changed.